significance of Jesus' power? What are the implications to Jesus' power? What has been your response to that? When your pride is challenged, because that happens when we are following Christ, when we get a hold of the significance of his power, how likely are you to dig in? When your pride is challenged, do you dig in, or does it humble you? How likely are you to repent? So that's the question. Question 3, what has been your response to the significance of Jesus' power? When your pride is challenged, are you likely to dig in, to just stand on that pride and try to keep a hold of it? Or how likely are you to repent? Maybe you'll go in the other direction. Pray about that and talk about that now. Okay, so for question 4, we're kind of talking about fighting on the right battlefield here, right? The battle that we fight is not against flesh and blood, it's against unseen rulers and principalities in the spiritual realm. We talked about that verse. So for question 4, here's the question. Do you struggle with fighting in the flesh, with fighting on the wrong battlefield, with trying to work out your battles circumstantially? Do you struggle with fighting in the flesh? If so, what does that look like for you specifically? And then, what flesh desire or idol must you renounce today? Remember at the end of the message, Pastor Lynn talked about those 3 R's, renunciation, resistance, and restraint. Well, what flesh desire or idol must you renounce today? So that's question 4. Do you struggle with fighting in the flesh? If so, what does that look like specifically? And then what flesh desire or idol must you renounce today? Pray about that and talk about that now. Okay, for question 5, remember we, in the message, Pastor Lynn talked about some verses from Luke where there was a man that was having some really serious demonic struggles. He was not in his right mind in the beginning of the story. The entire town had tried to help this man with every worldly method available to them, and yet he was destructive to himself, and he harmed everybody that came into contact with him. He also preferred to be among the dead. He was also very immodest. Remember, we talked about those things, but at the end of the story, Jesus healed him, and he was in his right mind. He was sane. He was in his right mind. So here's the question. Think back to the message. Consider everything that God has been working with you on throughout this lesson, and then consider this question. According to the evidence, are you in your right mind? Now, I know that the example of that man from Luke was very extreme, but still, when people are not in their right minds, nothing helps them. They're destructive to themselves. They're destructive to everybody that comes into contact with them. Oftentimes, they're immodest. Oftentimes, maybe they don't want to hang out in a cemetery, but they prefer to be around worldly people that are spiritually dead. So, that in mind, according to the evidence, are you in your right mind? I know it's a tough question, but really pray about this and be willing to listen to God here and talk about that question now. Okay, takeaway question. What has helped you the most from this message, from Pastor Lynn's message on Sunday, and then from this group? What are your next steps? And then, of course, will you take those steps? And what's it going to look like to take those steps? How can your life group help you take those steps? How can how can you help to educate your own prayers and the prayers of those that God has put in your sphere of influence or around you? How can you help to educate the prayers? What has helped you most from this message? What are your next steps? What do those steps look like, and will you take them? All right, that's it for this week, guys. Hopefully my internet connection has remained stable enough for this message to go out, and very grateful to be here on vacation with my family, but at the same time, I miss you guys, and I'm really looking forward to getting back. And Lord willing, I'll see you next week.